The vast expanse of the Orus Nebula stretched out like a cosmic ocean, its colors shifting in ways that defied understanding. Pulsing greens, deep blues, and fiery oranges that seemed to bleed into one another. Stars twinkled like distant eyes, watching over the galaxy. At the heart of this nebulous, at the Celestial Forum, a grand floating city built upon a massive asteroid core, brimming with alien life from across the universe. The structure hummed with energy, its towering spires reaching up like the fingers of ancient gods. Inside, the air buzzed with the voices of 1,000 different species. Humanoid figures from distant star systems conversed with sentient machines that shimmered with holographic data. Amphibious beings, their skin a translucent shade of cerulean, glided effortlessly through the transparent walkways. While towering, insectoid creatures chittered among themselves in a rhythmic cacophony. The celestial city had always been a melting pot of cultures, but today it was alive with an even greater sense of anticipation, for an event of unimaginable significance was about to unfold. The trial of the cosmos, an ancient rite where beings from across the universe tested their strength, wit, and will in pursuit of the legendary celestial shard, the key to unimaginable power. As beings of all forms and origins gathered around the grand arena, the very fabric of space seemed to hold its breath. The shimmering Colosseum, made of the rarest iridescent stone, stretched high above the city, its outer walls etched with symbols of countless civilizations. It stood as both a symbol of unity and conflict, where the fate of entire worlds had often been decided. The arena, a churning expanse of energy fields and shifting landscapes, would test the contestants like never before. And yet, in the midst of the celestial chaos, one figure stood apart from the crowd. Lyra Solara, a human mother with a heart as fierce as the stars themselves. Clad in the signature armor of the Terran fleet, she was a lone warrior in a sea of alien beings. Her eyes locked onto the arena ahead. The odds were stacked against her, but the fate of Earth, the very planet that had birthed her, was at stake. The trial of the cosmos was not just a competition of strength or intellect. It was a battle for survival. For Lyra, this was more than a game. It was her last hope to prevent the destruction of Earth. If she succeeded, the future of humanity would be secured. If she failed, the Earth would fall, and she would be the only one left to watch as it crumbled into the abyss. As the celestial drums began to echo, signaling the start of the event, Lyra knew that her greatest challenge had just begun. She wasn't here for the prize or glory. She was here to save the Earth, no matter what the cost. The stars would bear witness to her struggle. Lyra Solara didn't look like the other contestants. While alien warriors from across the galaxy adjusted their intricate biomechanical armor or practiced deep meditative rituals to sharpen their focus, Lyra stood by herself in a corner of the Celestial Forum's preparation area, casually adjusting the straps on her weathered Terran combat suit. The suit was far from the polished, sleek designs favored by most intergalactic participants. It was battered and scarred from years of use, covered in patches and insignias from battles fought in forgotten corners of the galaxy. She wasn't holding a weapon that glimmered with unknown technology, nor was she standing in front of holographic screens analyzing battle strategies. Instead, Lyra was sipping a cup of plain coffee, looking entirely at ease, as if she were just another Terran mom who dropped her kids off at school and decided to take a walk around the galaxy. Her hair, an unruly tangle of dark curls, was pulled back into a messy ponytail. Her demeanor was relaxed, almost nonchalant, especially when compared to the intimidating figures around her. The towering insectoid competitor from the Zixian sector, whose exoskeleton glistened under the fluorescent lights, took one look at Lyra and gave an audible sneer. The aquatic beings from Ryza 7 stared at her in confusion as they adjusted their biosuits, which were more advanced than anything she had ever seen. Yet Lyra didn't flinch. She didn't even bat an eyelash. "Hey, where's the bathroom around here?" she asked casually to one of the officials as she sipped her coffee, seemingly unbothered by the intense stares from the assembled champions. The official blinked, taken aback by the simplicity of the question. It wasn't the typical intensity or tactical mindset that most of the competitors exuded. "I'm just here to save my planet," Lyra said, a soft chuckle escaping her lips as she flicked a stray curl out of her face. "I don't need to impress anyone. Besides, I've got enough stress back home with my son's homework to deal with. This is just another day in the office." To the others, It might have seemed like hubris, but to those who had faced Earth's silent wars, to those who had witnessed the steady erosion of their home's future, Lyra's confidence wasn't arrogance. It was a quiet defiance of someone who had lived through far worse than the machinations of any alien empire. As the alien competitors returned to their meticulous preparations, Lyra threw her coffee cup into the waste disposal unit and walked toward the entrance to the arena. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips as she glanced at her reflection in the glass. No, she wasn't like them. But maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what would make her the last hope for Earth. The grand arena pulsed with a low hum as the colossal doors slid open, revealing the trial of the cosmos in all its glory. The atmosphere inside crackled with energy, and the shifting holographic landscape was alive with unpredictable terrains. Mountains, oceans, deserts, and dense jungles all interconnected by rifts of unstable space-time. Only the bravest or the most desperate would dare to face the trial, and Lyra Solar was both. At the far end of the arena stood her opponent, Karnak the Unyielding, a hulking figure whose very presence seemed to warp the air around him. A veteran of countless intergalactic battles, Karnak was a legend, feared across the galaxy for his unmatched strength and brutal tactics. His species, the Xylogens, were known for their resilience and ability to withstand extreme environments. Karnak himself had been undefeated in every trial for over 4 centuries, earning the title of Champion of the Cosmos by crushing all who dared to challenge him. His armor, an imposing exoskeleton crafted from the core material of a collapsing star, gleamed menacingly under the arena's lights. The rumble of his voice could be heard even before he spoke. "Another human?" he growled, the words reverberating through the arena. This will be a swift end. Lyra didn't flinch. She was used to underestimations. After all, she was only a human, a single mother from Earth, against beings who had fought in wars that spanned galaxies. Her only advantage? The sheer determination to protect the one thing she had left, her son, and by extension, the Earth itself. As the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, the odds were broadcast for all to hear. Lyra Solara, statistical impossibility. The crowd's murmur of disbelief was almost tangible. No human had ever even made it past the first round of the trial, let alone face an opponent like Karnak. Yet, here she was, undaunted, unbowed, and ready for the fight of her life. With each passing second, the weight of the situation pressed on her chest. The entire future of Earth rested on her shoulders. If she could somehow secure the celestial shard, the only artifact capable of stopping the alien invasion threatening her home, she could save humanity. But the path to victory seemed impossible. The Xylogen champion cracked his knuckles, his gaze narrowing on Lyra. His enormous frame loomed over her, a living wall of muscle and armor. "You will fall, just like all the others," he sneered, preparing his weapons, a pair of energy-laced blades that could slice through the toughest of alloys with ease. Lyra exhaled slowly, gathering every ounce of her focus. Her chances of winning were slimmer than the threads of space-time that surrounded the arena, but she had learned long ago that sometimes the greatest weapon wasn't strength or strategy. It was a will to keep fighting when everything else seemed lost. With a deep breath, she stepped into the arena, her heart pounding with the weight of her responsibility. She was outmatched, outgunned, and outclassed in every conceivable way. But as long as her son's face burned brightly in her mind, she knew she would never give up. She would fight to the very ENDAS. The countdown to the start of the trial began. Lyra Solar stood in the corner of the preparation area, calmly stretching and warming up, though her routine was anything but conventional. While the others were deep in meditation, adjusting complex gear, or practicing elegant combat stances, Lyra was busy taking off her armored gloves and rummaging to the pockets of her suit. "All right, let's see," she muttered to herself, pulling out an old, battered tennis ball. "Gotta work on that reaction time." Nearby, a towering, armored alien with a head resembling a multi-eyed jellyfish gave Lyra a quizzical glance. Lyra, in her casual manner, tossed the ball into the air, catching it with an exaggerated flourish as if it were some kind of championship move. Excuse me," the alien said in a low, gurgling voice, clearly confused by the sight. "That is part of your combat preparation?" "Hey, if it worked in Earth's leagues of dodgeball, it'll work here," Lyra replied with a grin. It's all about hand-eye coordination. Plus, it's fun. You should try it sometime. The alien blinked, unsure whether to be offended or amused, before shrugging and returning to its rigorous training routine. Lyra's antics didn't bother her. She had learned long ago to take life as it came, no matter how strange or overwhelming it might seem. Next, she dug into her pocket and pulled out a small, worn-out notebook. Flipping through its pages, she muttered, "Okay, quick reminder, don't forget to activate the stabilization fields in the suit after the first round. Oh, and I should definitely eat something before round 3. I swear, I always forget to eat. Bad habit." She then began practicing something entirely unexpected. A series of quirky, exaggerated dance moves, arms swinging in wide arcs and feet tapping in odd rhythms. A few of the more serious competitors turned their heads in confusion as she spun and twirled like she was rehearsing for a festival instead of preparing for the battle of her life. A stoic, armored being from the Vornak species, renowned for their battle-hardened discipline, raised one brow, clearly perturbed. "Are you dancing?" he asked, his voice a deep, gravelly growl. Lyra paused mid-spin, catching her breath. "Yup, works wonders for loosening up the muscles. Plus, it's way more fun than just standing around flexing and glaring." She gave the Vornak a wink, before resuming her twirls, utterly unfazed. The Vornak's confusion only deepened, and he slowly backed away to continue his silent, brooding preparation. Then, as the arena doors opened, Lyra grabbed one last item from her bag, a stuffed animal, a small, plush version of a Terran dog. She tucked it securely into the front pocket of her suit. The oddness of it all wasn't lost on the other competitors. The crystalline beings hummed in discordant tones, and a group of energy-based creatures vibrated in what seemed to be laughter. But Lyra was undeterred. She raised her hand in the air, the stuffed animal now sticking out of her pocket like a beacon of defiance. "Don't worry, little buddy," she said to the plush dog. "I've got this. Earth is counting on us." The energy beings pulsed harder, their laughter growing louder. Even the insectoid Karnak raised an eyebrow, momentarily distracted by the sight. "You are strange," he rumbled, his voice laced with disbelief. Lyra just grinned. "Yep, but I'm also the one who's going to win this thing." As the countdown continued, Lyra stood there, one last sip of coffee in hand, knowing her unconventional approach was throwing everyone off balance. The odds were still stacked against her, but if there was one thing she'd learned in life, it was that sometimes the most unpredictable tactics were the ones that worked best. And as the gates of the arena began to open, Lyra's last words before stepping into the trial were simple, yet full of determination. "Let's dance, Karnak." Lyra's first opponent was a Vorian shifter, a creature who could bend the laws of space and time, slipping in and out of different dimensions in the blink of an eye. It was the kind of enemy that would have sent most participants into a spiral of confusion and fear, impossible to predict, impossible to track. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, confident that the match would be over in moments. Lyra stood at the center of the arena, her hands casually resting on her hips. The Vorian shifter loomed across from her, flickering between solid and ghostly forms. It let out a low, mechanical hum as it shifted, its glowing eyes narrowing. "You will not be able to strike what you cannot see," it said in a voice that vibrated through the very fabric of space. Lyra didn't seem bothered in the slightest. She grinned, an almost mischievous twinkle in her eyes. "Guess we'll find out, won't we?" As the shifter disappeared once again, the audience gasped. It was an advantage that had crushed many before her. But Lyra wasn't like the others. As the Vorian reappeared behind her, preparing for a devastating blow, Lyra simply spun around and held up a small, innocuous device, a laser pointer. The bright red that danced across the arena floor, and just as the shifter materialized, it found itself fixated on the erratic movement of the laser. It hesitated, unsure of what to make of the distraction. "I gotta say, your teleportation skills are impressive," Lyra said, her voice sweet and casual. "But you know what they say, cats don't like lasers." The Vorian, disoriented by the flashing, tried to shift again, but its movements were erratic, each one either too late or too early, as the red beam continued to dart around the arena. Lyra took advantage of the confusion, leaping forward in a blur of motion and landing a solid, if unorthodox, punched to the shifter's core. The impact sent the creature tumbling back, flickering violently. Before it collapsed, its form solidifying back into the real world, unconscious. The crowd erupted in stunned silence. Then a wave of laughter and applause rolled through the stands. The Vorian had been defeated, not by the expected high-tech weaponry or precision strikes, but by a laser pointer and a bit of Her next match was against a Xylothian gladiator, a creature of pure, destructive force. With skin like living stone and the strength to crush mountains, this was the kind of opponent most would hesitate to face. But Lyra wasn't most people. The gladiator towered over her, its body rippling with muscle. It snarled, "You will be nothing but dust beneath my feet." Lyra gave him a playful wink. "I'd rather be dust than a pile of rocks." She was all confidence, but also keenly aware that the gladiator's brute strength could end her in a single blow. As the fight began, the Xylothian charged at her with terrifying speed. Instead of ducking or dodging like a traditional fighter, Lyra did something unexpected. She sprinted straight at him. The gladiator's fists swung down like hammers, but Lyra, with a quick roll to the side, grabbed something from her belt, a small canister of foam. "Here's a little surprise," Lyra called as she aimed the canister directly at the gladiator's feet. The foam expanded on contact, quickly covering his legs and creating a slippery, sticky mess. "What?" The Xylothian staggered, its massive form unable to maintain balance as the foam clung to its limbs, rendering it temporarily immobilized. Lyra didn't waste a second. She moved with swift precision, placing a quick series of strikes to the creature's head and upper torso, all while continuing to keep the foam canister aimed and spraying just enough to prevent the gladiator from regaining his footing. The Xylothian roared in frustration, but his efforts to free himself only made things worse. The foam was too thick and adhesive. With a final, well-placed kick to the creature's side, Lyra sent him crashing to the ground, defeated, still flailing and snarling but unable to move. The crowd, who had expected a battle of raw force, stood in stunned silence once again. Then the applause came, louder than before, mixed with an odd mixture of amusement and admiration. Lyra stood over the fallen gladiator, dusting her hands off as if she had just finished a quick errand. "See? Problem solved," she said, grinning at the stunned arena. As she walked off the stage, she overheard one of the officials muttering in disbelief, "Did she just use foam to beat a stone giant?" Lyra winked over her shoulder. "You'd be amazed what a little creativity can do." The next match was already waiting for her. This time, the odds were even more insurmountable, but Lyra's unpredictability had only just begun. The arena was full of challenges, but no one could predict how the most unlikely contender would keep defying the odds with her unconventional and downright quirky methods. Karnak the Unyielding stood in the shadows of the arena, watching as Lyra Solar's latest victory was broadcast across the galaxy. His massive hands were clasped tightly behind his back, his expression unreadable beneath the faceplate of his battle armor. The ancient Xylogian senses were finely tuned, sharper than any beings in the arena, and yet there was something about this human woman that unsettled him. He had been undefeated for centuries, and yet this earthling, this mother, was something entirely different. His gaze flicked back to the screen as Lyra casually jogged off the battlefield, a mock salute aimed at the crowd. The Xylogian's brows furrowed in confusion. This is not how it's supposed to go. He replayed the footage of her earlier matches. Against the Vorian shifter, she had toyed with the fabric of space itself, by distracting her opponent with a laser pointer. With the Xylothian gladiator, she had used nothing more than foam to immobilize a creature capable of lifting mountains. No traditional weapons, no complex strategies, no overwhelming power, just sheer unpredictability. It was madness. It was unacceptable. Karnak's mandibles clicked together in agitation as his mind reeled. He had studied the combat traditions of every galaxy for millennia, perfected his own technique in the fires of war, and defeated countless champions in trials of strength, skill, and intellect. His tactics were tried and true, honed over centuries of conquest. There was honor in tradition. There had to be. The laws of combat were sacred, unbreakable. But this human, she wasn't following any of those rules. No, she was breaking the game itself. He had seen fighters outsmart their opponents, sure, but this was different. Lyra's approach wasn't based on technique or mastery of power. She wasn't interested in the rituals or protocols of battle. It was as though she was playing a game no one else knew the rules to, a game where the only rule was do whatever works. Karnak paced back and forth in his quarters, his fists clenched as he reflected on his opponent's journey so far. Why isn't she following the path of combat tradition? He thought, feeling the slow burn of frustration creeping through his mind. Why hasn't she shown respect for the trial? He remembered his first challenge, when he had conquered a fleet of warships with nothing but his unyielding strength and relentless will. He recalled the cheers of the spectators, the reverence with which his opponents had fallen. There had been rules then, an order that had made the battle a matter of pride and honor. It was simple: strength over intellect, power over finesse. That was the way of the arena. And now this woman, a human with no understanding of tradition, was defying everything he had known, succeeding through absurdity, through chaos. "She does not belong here," Karnak muttered, his voice a growl, echoing in the empty space of his quarters. He watched her again as she celebrated yet another unorthodox victory, surrounded by amused cheers and bewildered whispers. His chest tightened not from fear, but from something deeper, a feeling of profound irritation mixed with grudging admiration. Her unpredictability had already undone half of his carefully laid strategy. Lyra Solara was a wild card, a living chaos that threatened to unravel the very fabric of the trial of the cosmos. And yet, deep down, Karnak couldn't help but feel a spark of something else, a strange, reluctant curiosity. What made her tick? What was driving this human woman, who had no business being here, yet somehow seemed to thrive in a contest meant for the mightiest of beings? The more he thought about it, the more he realized that maybe this wasn't just about strength anymore. No, it was about adaptability. Lyra had no history, no reputation, no ancient power to rely on. She was making her own path, but that, in itself, made her the most dangerous kind of opponent. Perhaps, Karnak thought, as a cold smirk spread across his faceplate, this battle isn't about power. Perhaps it's about breaking traditions. And maybe, just maybe, Lyra Solara was exactly the kind of fighter he had never faced before. One who refused to bow to the weight of centuries of tradition and combat rules. One who didn't play the game. She rewrote it. He clenched his fists. Fine, let her rewrite the rules. But I will break her. The Xylogian turned away from the screen, his mind already formulating a new strategy. Lyra's unorthodox methods had made her a wild card, but it was time for him to remind her that tradition and the old ways were not so easily defied. The atmosphere in Celestial Forum was electric, a charged tension hanging in the air as Lyra Solara prepared for the final confrontation. The arena, once filled with the cautious murmurs of onlookers, now buzzed with disbelief. No one could quite grasp how a human, a single mother from a backwater planet, had made it this far. Not only had she outlasted the fiercest warriors in the galaxy, but she had done so in an approach that defied all logic and tradition. Spectators from 100 different species filled the stands, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and confusion. They whispered in astonishment, eyes flickering between the holographic screens showing her previous victories. Her laser pointer trick, the foam trap that had defeated the gladiator, and her casual, almost laughable demeanor during each match. The crowd was in shock, and even the most seasoned warriors were left scratching their heads, unsure how to respond to an opponent who refused to follow the rules of the game. "Impossible," muttered one crystalline being, its form pulsing with frustration. How does she keep winning? The betting markets had gone haywire. Across the galaxy, the odds on Lyra had steadily plummeted, until they finally hit a glitch that flashed across every interface. Error does not compute. Even the cold, calculating algorithms could no longer account for her unpredictable, unorthodox methods. Backstage, the competitors who had once sneered at her now watched with a mixture of bewilderment and grudging respect. The insectoid Karnak, her final opponent, stood across the room, his eyes narrow slits beneath his battle mask, his fists clenched in frustration. This human had no place here. She had no history. She had no tradition. And yet somehow she had torn through the galaxy's most formidable warriors, one after the other. Lyra's tactics, using whatever she could find, from foam to distractions to sheer guts, were unrecognizable to the Xylogian. Her unpredictability rattled him. How was it that the one opponent he had dismissed as a joke had become his most dangerous adversary? The officials in the high towers observed the spectacle with unease. They had seen it all: the brutal clashes of champions, the polished precision of seasoned fighters, but nothing like this. Nothing like Lyra Solara. One official turned to another. "We might have to consider recalculating the rules. This is unprecedented." Another shook their head. "She's breaking every expectation. The whole tournament's out of balance now." Across the arena, a hush fell as Lyra stepped into the final stage of the tournament. The very ground beneath her feet seemed to tremble in anticipation, though whether it was from the weight of the approaching final battle or the energy of the crowd, no one could tell. The holographic screen above her flickered with an announcement: Lyra Solara, a galactic underdog, one victory away from saving Earth. A low murmur spread through the crowd. Earth, a planet that had never even participated in the trials before, was now on the brink of securing something no one had thought possible. The stakes had never been higher. Is this really happening? A bystander's voice quivered in disbelief. This human! She could actually win. She could beat Karnak. Lyra stood at the edge of the arena, feeling the weight of their gazes upon her. She had never intended to become this symbol of defiance, this anomaly in a contest governed by tradition and brute force. But the truth was undeniable. She had made it this far by being exactly what she was, a mother willing to do whatever it took to protect her home. She wasn't here to prove herself to anyone. She wasn't here to play by anyone's rules but her own. And that, she realized, was her greatest weapon. As the final match approached, officials began to fidget nervously. The arena's quantum shielding was recalibrated to account for the chaos Lyra had unleashed in previous rounds. Her methods were throwing off the intricate, high-tech sensors that had governed every match before hers. They couldn't predict her next move, and that was exactly how she wanted it. "Karnak," Lyra said, her voice cutting through the electric hum of the arena. "Ready for the most unpredictable fight of your life?" The Xylogian's only response was a low, rumbling growl. He wasn't here for games. But as he locked eyes with the human standing before him, he realized that this wasn't going to be a fight anyone would have expected. In the silence before the final round began, the tension in the air was palpable. This wasn't just about strength or tradition anymore. This was about breaking the system entirely. Lyra's final victory would either rewrite the future of combat or tear it all down. As the countdown hit 0, she stepped forward, a smile tugging at her lips. "Let's make this interesting, shall we?" And with that, she moved, ready to face the one challenge left in her path, completely unwilling to play by anyone's rules but her own. The entire galaxy held its breath. The arena shook as the final confrontation began. The hum of the crowd faded into a tense, breathless silence, and the colossal gates of the arena slid open. In one corner stood Karnak the Unyielding, towering in poise, his forearms flexing as he activated the high-energy shields that enveloped his body. His gaze was cold, unyielding, a veteran of countless battles who had never once faced a challenge quite like the one before him. In the opposite corner, Lyra Solara stood, looking almost out of place in the sea of alien warriors. Her stance was relaxed, her expression calm, almost playful, entirely at odds with the moment. She straightened her combat suit, glancing briefly at the stuffed animal still tucked into her pocket. The crowd murmured in disbelief. This was no grand, ceremonial warrior. This was a mother, someone who had no place in their galaxy's traditions. Karnak's mandibles clicked together, a low rumble vibrating through his chest. "This will be your last mistake, human." Lyra simply tilted her head, grinning. "Well, I'm not exactly a pro at this, but I'm pretty sure mistakes are the best part of figuring things out. Let's see what you got, big guy." The trial of the cosmos was about to reach its climax, and it was clear that this battle would be more than just physical. It would be a battle between tradition and chaos, between precision and adaptability. Karnak struck first, launching forward with terrifying speed. His forefists came crashing down, each blow sending shockwaves through the arena. But Lyra was already moving. Instead of trying to dodge with precise movements, she flung herself to the side with a wild, uncoordinated roll, narrowly avoiding the massive fists. The crowd gasped as she tumbled awkwardly, but as she landed on her feet with surprising grace, she let out a laugh. "Did I just get out of the way by accident?" she called out with a playful wink, clearly enjoying the absurdity of it all. Karnak's eyes narrowed. "You mock me," he growled, but there was an edge of uncertainty in his voice. Her unpredictability was getting under his skin. Lyra didn't give him time to recover. She whipped out a small handheld drone, which buzzed to life in the air and zipped around Karnak's head like a mischievous insect. The Xylogian tried to swat away with his powerful arms, but the drone was too fast, buzzing just out of reach, distracted him for a crucial moment. "Let's call that a distraction," Lyra quipped, her tone light despite the intensity of the battle. Karnak's face twisted in anger. He switched tactics, unleashing a barrage of energy pulses from his gauntlets. Precise, controlled, and brutal. But Lyra wasn't ready to follow the script. Instead of trying to shield herself or counterattack with a weapon of her own, she pulled out something completely unexpected. A basic, old-school mirror. As the beam shot toward her, Lyra angled the mirror just so, reflecting one of the energy pulses back at Karnak. The shot hit him squarely in the chest, knocking him off balance for a moment. "Old-school tactics, my friend," she said, grinning as the mirror dropped back into her pouch. "I didn't just read about them in history books. I live with them every day." The crowd was silent for a beat, then erupted into stunned applause. No one had ever seen a battle like this before. Karnak was trying to follow the rules, strategy, power, precision, but Lyra was making up her own game as she went along, throwing every rule book into the stars. Infuriated, Karnak roared, his massive arms swinging in a flurry of deadly strikes. But Lyra was everywhere and nowhere at once, her movements unpredictable, her body a blur of dodges and acrobatics. She'd never been trained for this kind of combat, but the stakes were too high. Earth was on the line. Her son, her home, everything was riding on this moment. Then, just as Karnak attempted to land the final blow, a crushing hammer fist aimed directly at Lyra's head, she did something no one could have anticipated. Instead of running or defending herself, she grabbed the stuffed animal from her pocket and, with an exaggerated swing, hurled it straight into Karnak's face. For a moment, the arena fell into complete silence. The massive Xylogian froze, blinking in stunned disbelief. The plush dog bounced off his face, and for the briefest of moments, it seemed like the universe itself had paused. Then, Lyra's voice rang out through silence. "Whoops. I guess I was supposed to throw something else, huh?" Karnak, still reeling from the ridiculousness of the moment, gave a growl of frustration. "You will pay for this." But as he advanced, Lyra had already moved, her feet light on the ground, anticipating his every move. She dove between his legs, narrowly avoiding his crushing kick, and rolled across the arena floor. As she came to a stop, she grinned. "Time to wrap this up," she said under her breath, her fingers flicking a small, final device, a magnetic pulse grenade, right at the Xylogian's massive chest. The pulse sent a wave of magnetic force that disrupted his armor stabilizers, causing his movements to become sluggish and erratic. Lyra's eyes sparkled as she seized the moment. In a final, unexpected burst of speed, she rushed forward and landed a swift, unpolished punch to Karnak's exposed jaw. The force of her blow wasn't enough to destroy him, but it was enough to disorient him, knocking him back onto the ground. The arena fell into a stunned silence. Lyra Solara, the human underdog, had outwitted and outlasted the most formidable warrior in the galaxy. Karnak's form twitched on the floor, his eyes still filled with fury and disbelief. Lyra stood over him, panting slightly but grinning. "Well," she said, wiping her brow, "I guess that's one way to save Earth." The crowd went wild. It wasn't just a victory, it was a statement. Tradition had been upended, precision had been shattered, and the game had been redefined. Lyra Solara had won, against all odds, not by fighting the way she was supposed to, but by fighting the way she knew best. She hadn't just broken the rules. She had rewritten them. The arena was still, but the echoes of Lyra's victory reverberated through every corner of the galaxy. The final blow had been struck, not by brute force, but by a single mother's unrelenting spirit, her unpredictability, and her willingness to break every rule that had defined combat for eons. As Karnak lay defeated, the crowd's roar grew louder, an overwhelming crescendo of disbelief, admiration, and excitement. The officials above the arena looked on in stunned silence, their holographic screens flickering with data they couldn't process. Lyra Solara, the human who had no business being there, had done the impossible. Karnak, once the undefeated champion of the trial, remained on the floor, panting with a mix of exhaustion and humiliation. His pride had been shattered, not by a stronger opponent, but by an opponent who had refused to adhere to the traditions he had lived by for centuries. The silence stretched what felt like an eternity before the voice of the announcer broke through. Lyra Solara, the first human to ever win the trial of the cosmos. As Lyra stood there, taking the weight of her victory, her mind flashed to Earth, her son, her home, everything she had fought for. This moment, this victory, wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong, for every person who had been overlooked, underestimated, or ignored. It was proof that the impossible could be done, no matter how unorthodox a path. Her thoughts drifted to Karnak, still struggling to rise to his feet. He was a living embodiment of the old ways, the rigid rules that had dictated power for eons. But Lyra had shattered that. She had shown the universe that sometimes, to change the world, you had to first break the game. As she approached Karnak, she offered him a hand, an unexpected gesture. He looked at it for a long moment, his mandibles clicking in confusion, before he slowly took her hand and pulled himself up. His gaze met hers, and for the first time, there was a hint of respect in his eyes. "You have broken the system," he admitted, his voice low and grudging. "Not by defeating me with strength, but by defeating me with your unpredictability." Lyra smiled, the same easy grin she had worn throughout the tournament. "Yeah, well, sometimes you just have to think outside the rules." As the final moments of the trial played out, and the crowd began to disperse, Lyra couldn't help but reflect on everything that had brought her here. She had entered the tournament with nothing but a desire to protect the people she loved. She had no formal training, no elite skills, no ancient legacy. She was just a human, a single mother, and yet, somehow, she had managed to outlast every opponent with nothing but her adaptability, her heart, and the knowledge that rules were made to be challenged, not worshipped. Perfection doesn't leave room for evolution, a voice whispered in her mind. It was something she had overheard during the tournament, a comment from a fighter who had come to understand that the status quo was a prison. Lyra nodded to herself. Exactly. Rules weren't limits. They were opportunities. Opportunities to rethink what was possible, to grow and to change. As she stepped off the arena floor, a new understanding washed over her. The galaxy might have its traditions, its games, and its sacred rules, but Lyra had just rewritten the most important one of all. There is no one way to fight. There is no one path to victory. There are only the moments you choose to create, the chances you take, and the people you dare to protect. The universe had learned a valuable lesson that day. The rules may remain, but they would no longer be the only way forward. As the first human to win the trial, Lyra Solara had proved that even in the face of overwhelming odds, chaos could be just as powerful as precision, and unpredictability could be more potent than tradition. And in that knowledge, there was hope for a future that looked very different from the one that had come before. She glanced up at the stars, Earth stars, and smiled. She had done it, and it was only the beginning as Lyra stood victorious. The echoes of the crowd still ringing in her ears, the universe began to shift around her. Her unexpected triumph over Karnak and the ancient traditions of the trial of the cosmos had left ripples far beyond the arena. The officials, stunned by her methods, whispered among themselves, recalculating what it meant to be a champion, what it meant to win. But Lyra knew that her victory was only the beginning. The galaxy had been forced to reckon with humanity's potential, and it wasn't going to stop here. Back on Earth, messages were already being sent. A faint but clear transmission came through, directly from her son. "Mom, did you really just win?" Lyra chuckled, looking up at the stars. "Guess I did, kid, and I'm just getting started." The vastness of space stretched out before her, with countless worlds still to explore, countless battles yet to be fought. Her unconventional victory had already begun to spark debates across galactic councils, with whispers of what humanity could bring to the table, what they might disrupt next. Combat academies that once ignored Earth now wondered what kind of recruits would emerge from this strange, unpredictable planet. The rules had been shattered, and there was no going back. The announcer's voice echoed once more, but this time it carried a new tone, an invitation to something greater. Lyra Solara, hero of the trial of the cosmos, has proven that the impossible is only a challenge waiting to be solved. The future of a universe has changed. And as for Earth, well, we'll see just how far they can push the boundaries of tradition. As Lyra turned and walked off the arena floor, the stars glimmering ahead, she couldn't help but grin. Looks like the galaxy just got a little more interesting. And somewhere, far in the reaches of space, a new generation of combatants, human and alien alike, prepared for the ripple effect of Lyra's victory, knowing that the next time a challenge came, the rules would never be the same again. And if you'd like to hear a story based on a title of your choice, feel free to mention it in the comments. Smiling face with smiling eyes if you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts or the title you'd like to hear next. Your support means a lot. This story, Alone Against the Stars, a single mother's battle to save Earth, ends with a unique twist and an unpredictable journey. But there's more to unfold that could be crucial. If you'd like a story in a different title or genre, just let me know.